everybody, and welcome to another great episode of My EdTech Life. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful Tuesday evening, or it may be well until Wednesday, depending on where it is that you're joining us around the world. But wherever you are, thank you as always for making My EdTech Life what it is today. We really appreciate all the love. We appreciate all the likes, the shares, the follows, and all across all our social media. Thank you so much, everybody, for all the listens and, of course, visiting our YouTube channel, giving us a thumbs up in hopes of meeting our goal of getting to 1,000 subscribers. We just want to thank you for all of that, guys. As you know, we do what we do for you so we can continue to bring you some amazing conversations and we can bring you some amazing guests. And, of course, as always, tonight we definitely have an amazing guest that I am so excited for you all to get to know, to get to meet, to get to connect with, and obviously to also know the work that she is doing through Generation Mindful. So this evening, I would love to introduce you all to Suzanne Tucker. Suzanne, how are you doing this evening?
I am having my best night yet. How you doing?
I am doing great. Oh my gosh. I know we could have definitely been continuing our chat in the pre-chat and it was so good, but that kind of really primed us up and warmed us up to just get started in today's conversation. But thank you so much for, reaching out and, hopefully thank you that we were able to schedule this and make this conversation happen. As you know, I know that we have a mutual friend, a former guest here on the show, Gavin, that kind of made that connection. And so now I'm excited to have another amazing guest and make another connection and make another friend through a previous guest such as Gavin. So thank you so much again for finding some time this evening to join us. So let's go ahead and dive in, Suzanne. So for all our audience members that are joining us today who may not be familiar with your work yet, can you give us a little brief introduction and what your context is within the education space before we dive into our conversation?
Sure. So thanks for having me. I am a longtime physical therapist, parent educator. I've worked for nearly 30 years now on working with adults and children, and I've worked in school settings. And, when you do physical therapy, it's all about function. And interestingly enough, I started to get into the practice of empowerment-based education with families through my health center here in St. Louis. And I found that what we were looking for were these guide rails on relationships, right? Functional. We wanted it to be practical. I'm a mom of four. We're not served by just understanding the brain science. We're really looking to bring it practically, and I say playfully, into everyday life. So I've been a therapist educator for 30 years, but in 2016, I saw a real need in the space for tangible, play-based toys that take this learning, early emotional literacy, into everyday life. And that was really the spark that brought about Generation Mindful.
Excellent. Well, that is great. And thank you so much for that intro. And I'm definitely excited to learn more about Generation Mindful, like you mentioned, and reading about it and going to the website, which I have the website up right here, guys. So please make sure that you visit Generation Mindful at genmindful.com. And then, of course, I'll be sharing your social media, handles and where people can go by and visit and connect with you, because I think that's something that's so important. And obviously what you're contributing here into the space. And this is amazing, working in K through 12 space for 17 years total, but in the classroom for 11. I never really got to see a lot of this. As we know, education has changed. So I'm very curious to dive in and ask what inspired the creation of Generation Mindful and its play-based tools like the ones that you mentioned.
Yes. Well, as I mentioned, I was doing in-person classes here, parent education classes with diverse communities all across the board. And the pain point was the same. We struggled with taking the science into everyday life. When a parent, though, could adopt the thoughts and really hold on to the learning so that it was there for them in a moment of stress or, let's say, misbehavior or disconnection with a child. That's where transformation was happening. So there was actually one specific mom who moved from, she was spanked when she was raised, she was spanking her children, and she took a major leap of self-awareness and motivation. And it came from adopting the mindset, I want to connect before I correct. And it was that mantra, connect before I correct, that changed everything for her. It was something we covered in class. And when she shared her story, how just those words, connect before you correct, she said it to herself in a moment where she was actually about to spank her child for not listening. And when she shared the story in class, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. We all felt what was happening was important, it was powerful. It's how we change generational cycles. It shifted the narrative. And what really struck me in that moment was how simple it can be, but and how powerful it can be when it starts with our thoughts, right? Our mindset, that becomes our words, it becomes our actions. And truly, she was the one. She said to me, I don't know what you did, I don't know how it happened, but I want to teach my partner and I want to teach my child's teacher. And she said, how do I do this? And I went home and I said, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. And I started to look at the last 2 decades of work that I had done. And I had seen moments of transformation and healing like this before. And she really said, like, figure it out. It is a formula, and I want you to figure it out. And that was really that night when I realized what we're missing are these tangibles that are like little training wheels that take us there. They introduce these new mindsets, these thoughts that can become our words and they can become our actions. So that was really the spark for our first product we launched on Kickstarter. It was a set of mantra cards. It's called Peacemakers, and it's a set of it's a tool that builds social emotional skills by sparking conversation, which is right where what you and I are doing right now. We are practicing our social emotional skills. So that was the start of it all, and it really grew from there.
No, that is something that is amazing, and again, I guess I can open up and share a little bit about that, as far as even myself growing up, yeah, Hispanic household, mom and dad, and really, it was just consequences first before the explanation, and it was always like, okay, consequences first, and then I'll tell you why I did this. And it was, be and again, being an only child, I mean, often there's nothing that I can go ahead and kind of put past my mother or my father, like, because being an
Oh,
only child, it's like, she would tell me stories that I would just really,
yeah,
I'd say, well, the cat did it. So I would be
yeah,
blaming the cat, or I'd be
right.
blaming the
Oh,
dog, because I didn't have little brother or big
right,
brother or sister to blame or anything. So they knew that it was me. But,
right.
like I mentioned right now, when you said that, I was like, it was very interesting because it just really reminded me a lot of my, growing up, my childhood, and the way that the story that you were, the way they felt, and they were saying, like, that trauma. I was like, oh wow, like that there are other people that have gone through that, or and kind of when I came into teaching, I would always tell my students too as well. It's like, hey, you know, um, uh, we're not always dealt the same cards. So I said, but we can break that cycle. We don't have to follow a certain cycle or a certain path that you may see put before you within, family or things of that sort. There, you can always be the one that breaks that.
Yeah.
And so right now, when you mentioned that, it was so interesting that sometimes and with that simple thought of
Mhm.
connect before you correct. And I was also thinking, even coming into teaching in the non-traditional sense, because I didn't go through college of education or pre-service. I came in from business and sales. And so I remember even in childhood, when we would ask the teacher, well, why? Well, just because. They wouldn't tell
Right,
you. It was just a
right.
consequence. And so I know what that did for me, that kind of helped me become a better teacher. And when the student said why, I said, you know what? I don't know, but let's figure it out together instead of just saying, no, just do it, just because that's the way it is. And so that is so interesting. Oh my gosh.
I love it, and you touched on so many topics.
Mhm.
Number 1, curiosity. I really don't think there's anything greater in education than sparking curiosity. I know you know the data, but I think it's fun for listeners out there to really realize that curiosity means you're motivated, you're engaged in your learning. So really, there are no bad questions, and curiosity is something we want to be sparking in our homes and in our classrooms. So at Gen M, we're really focused on early childhood centers, daycares, and homes, and sparking that permission to be curious. Because I don't know about you, but growing up, talking back, quote, being disrespectful, questioning your elders. I'm not proposing that we raise a generation of children who don't understand how to be empathetic or compassionate. But what I am proposing is that it helps to have permission to use your words. So at Gen M, we teach a very simple name it, feel it, heal it. And when we are given language, it is so important for our mental health and our self-understanding and self-awareness. So as a child, your mother, father were not given these skills. These tools were not modeled for them. And now here we are, adults, and wanting to use what we know about the brain science of connection and emotional education and teach this to our children. But I really feel like our generation is the first generation of adults that are being asked to use these daily at home and in the classroom. And we kind of are scratching our heads a little bit because largely these were not modeled for us.
Absolutely. No, and I agree with you 100%. It's a, and it kind of, I don't know. I just keep going back to that piece because oftentimes, like you said, if it's modeled for us, usually, when we find ourselves in a situation where we might feel a little bit uncomfortable, sometimes we always revert back to what was modeled for us or what we do. And maybe in that situation, like you mentioned, that specific parent was reverting back to what they saw and what was modeled for them. And now they're able to, you know, take a step back, realize and kind of see and think it through and making those connections, which is so important. And so I'm really seeing a lot of this connection right now, just in this little piece of a bit of conversation that we've had, even tying it into the classroom and the classroom setting. That makes me reflect on my practice too, as well. And, teacher practice during this time. I mean, I know it's a very tough time for a lot of educators out there right now currently, but I mean, we can definitely go on into a lot of that. But I definitely want to come back to a little bit more of what we just kind of started talking about, because you mentioned that on your website, and which is laid out beautifully, you have, several kits that are available for parents, for young children to be able to use. So I want to ask you, how do these kits that you have contribute to improving that, socio emotional skills within the children? And can you tell us maybe a little bit about what you may have available, depending on age group as well,
Sure.
for the students or the children, I
Sure.
should say?
Yes, we have the classroom time
Mhm.
and toolkit, and we have a number of tools specifically for the classroom. And what we're proud of is that these same tools can bridge seamlessly into the home. And if you talk to educators, they'll tell you, I believe it's 60% of educators say the number one barrier to social emotional learning in the classroom is not having it happen in the home. They're feeling that the barrier is that disconnect between home and school. So, as an educator therapist myself, I set out to create a set of tools specifically designed to bridge the gap. The social emotional learning gap is large between home and classroom. And we're not going to bridge that gap by creating tools that don't resonate with parents. So, they need to be simple, practical, and they need to, quote, work. And by that, I mean, children want to be engaged with tools that they're motivated and curious about and that they want to use. We talked a little bit about curiosity and the importance of motivation is large when it comes to learning. So with the Time and Toolkit, we designed something to replace timeouts and behavior management charts. So have you ever met a child that ran up to you and said, "Mommy, mommy, I had 4 timeouts today," and felt proud? No, because timeouts shame you. They say, "You did bad, you are bad, go away." They literally threaten the most important thing for a child is secure attachment and safe spaces. So a timeout by design is against our human wiring for safety and connection. What a time in says is, "You did bad, you were feeling bad. Let me help you. Let me teach you. Let's go through the steps." And the Time in Toolkit is explicit learning around the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s of how do I regulate my emotions? And we make it so simple. It's very, very simple. It's the name it, feel it, and heal it. And so it begins by creating a space in your home or classroom. And what that does is it signals to the child, feelings are safe in this home. Mistakes help me learn and grow. My mom or my educator has told me that it is safe to make a mistake, and that if I make a mistake, we are going to work it through and I'm going to learn from it. And so what we end up with is a compassionate, empathetic child who's practicing the skills it takes to be self-aware, to take care of themselves, and to be aware of others and to care for others, which is really the whole goal, isn't it, of much of education?
Yes, it really is. You've hit on so many things there. Well, first of all, you mentioning the timeouts, but I'm going to be honest. I am also not a fan of anything within the classroom, for example, that is going to kind of differentiate students in a certain way, which a lot of it is just like those clothespin charts where you're either in the red, the yellow, the orange, and so on. And I've always had a big issue with those being in class because you're really, making the student feel terrible if they're in the yellow. And again, is in a similar way, like, hey, going home and it's like, mommy, today I was in yellow, today I was in orange, today I was here. And, you know, uh, a lot of times and I think sometimes that's what was modeled for us. Those are the classroom management pieces that are there, but we don't really think about how much deeper it goes, because I think sometimes even as adults and being in teachers for a very long time, you're used to doing things a certain way, and it's always like, that's the way that I've done it, that's the way I'm always going to do it, and nothing's going to change. But because we don't think about what could actually be happening, or the consequences of that for the student being traumatized in that sense, and not understanding, or maybe also not getting an explanation of, hey, why am I always here? I don't
Yeah.
understand, and making those connections. So things of that, so you brought up that, and that really came up to my mind. Also, right now I know that there are a lot of schools out there that are doing or trying to really do a lot of the social emotional learning components. But I think sometimes a lot of it is really so teacher centered, in the sense that it's really teacher delivering, but there isn't enough participation for the students to really grasp those concepts and really make those connections, which is, I think, really important. Because again, if you're doing a program, we definitely, I know time is, of the essence, especially, in education, where you have to be in a certain curriculum. But if it is done properly, I know that it could be wonderful. But oftentimes I feel that because of the lack of time, we don't really do our due diligence, and our
I'd love
students.
to speak to that because
Yes.
you are so wise. You've hit on really the biggest barrier, a perceived barrier for an early childhood educator is, I don't have the time. And this is what makes the Time and Toolkit so fabulous to be used in the classroom. It is not only a classroom management tool, but it will actually save you time, because it will also save you burnout. And not only that, but it will save you from suspending children for misbehavior that may or may not be caused by learning differences, which is criminal in my book. To take a 4-year-old and to say, you are acting out, you are misbehaving, you are suspended, we are failing that child and we are putting them on what's called the school to prison pipeline. So I just want to break that down. The Time and Toolkit is a classroom management tool. And you don't introduce it by saying, if you're bad, you get sent over there. That is really just a dressed up time out. And the reason we need to be giving structured, scaffolded, and recognizable tools to classrooms, because classes, educators are creating their very own calming spaces they may or may not be evidence-based, and they definitely are not recognizable by the child, and they certainly cannot bridge into the home because the educator made it up. And it's not the same in Mr. Brown and Miss Smith's class. So we need would you ever teach a child to write their name by punishing them for doing it wrong? Would you ever say, Sammy, you did it wrong. Go away. Go sit on the step. I can't believe you wrote your name wrong. That is a horrible thing to think about happening to a child. Yet, 2, 3, 4-year-olds are being told, you did bad, you are bad, go away, when they have not wired their brain for basic social emotional skill capability. They are absolutely behaviorally on point developmentally. And yet we still are reinforcing skills negatively that they haven't acquired yet. We would never do that in any other part of education. I wanted to bring up one other thing. You brought up the idea of a little girl or a child getting punished in the classroom, being shamed, and then being sent home with a note, and it's just many levels of shame. And imagine what's happening to their sense of self. We had a little girl who was using the peacemaker cards at home with her mother. One of the cards she pull one every day before they go to school. It literally said, mistakes help me learn and grow. Well, she went to school, kindergarten that day, and she got busted for talking to her best friend on the reading carpet. She was sitting right next to her best friend, and they were talking instead of paying attention. So she got sent home with a red note. She got in trouble. And she went home and with tears down her eyes presented this card to her mother. And her mother wrote to me and told me what she said. And she said, Mommy, mistakes help me learn and grow, right? So before she had even processed with her mother, she in her own mind had reframed the punishment and had come to the truth that even though my teacher didn't like what was happening, I can learn from this moment. And the truth is that child did not need to be punished. She needed to be taught. And it's a good example. Many children out there are cooperative natured, and they are watching and they are scared by the punishment happening out there, and they are losing their voice and they are losing their permission to be their true authentic self. So we really risk a lot when we punish children for not having skills that they haven't yet to acquire. They haven't acquired these skills yet. So I feel really strongly that regulation is a skill. Emotional regulation is a skill, and we get to teach it.
Yes. No, you've hit on so many things there too that sometimes, and maybe depending on the grade level, I know that we're dealing with, we're talking about younger students, but sometimes I really feel that even as they come up, maybe in third grade, second grade, and so on, that I don't, they're fully developed to really understand still, and they're still making those connections. And like you said, I think a lot of times really it is just that genuine curiosity that they have, why they may question something, and so on. And what you're saying right now, my experience with that, and at least what I've seen, and you're saying like they're getting punished for skills that they haven't even learned yet. I think like for that, it's even in content areas when you're trying to teach a child math and you're teaching them the way that you learned math, which is, we lined up the numbers, you do the borrowing, but the child does not understand because they can't, and even research says they can't process it at that time. You can build them up to where they'll be able to do that standard algorithm, but it's like, no, this is the way it needs to be done. And it's that constant repetition of a way that they've never been able to do it or understand. and yet they're suffering. And there's a lot of that trauma too that goes on from grade to grade, and not necessarily in math, but it could be in any subject. And it was interesting that we're talking about this now too, because I was just having a conversation with some of my friends over the weekend and said I still remember the trauma from my first grade music teacher. I was the only kid in the whole grade level that was not allowed to be in choir because apparently I didn't sing that well, but
Oh,
everybody else was on.
wow.
But I got to be the stage hand and everything. But it really, still to this date, I was like, well, I never bothered really singing.
Mhm.
I even tried taking voice lessons and so on, which I did. And the lady was like, well, I mean, you're doing very well. Maybe it
Right.
just they didn't find the right key for you and so on. But all of that to say, or kind of reinforce what you're saying, how powerful, the what we are as adults within a classroom, so much power, and if not used correctly and making those adjustments and those connections, we are not doing our due diligence. It can be very harmful and hurtful for our young children that are coming up from grade level to grade level. And like you mentioned, if there's no consistency between, let's say, Mr. Mendoza and Mrs. Macias in the way that they're doing things, then that also has an effect on it too as well. So I just
Sure.
wanted to kind of throw that in. But okay, so but I want to learn more. I know that, we can definitely dive in a little bit more into this, but I know we talked about, obviously, self regulation being very, very important. And you talked about, the cards that the students are reading, and then, the mantras and so on, which are just wonderful tools to kind of help them prepare and just get that reinforcement, whether it's at home and at school. But it's important, like you mentioned, that consistency. So I want to ask you, with the parents, how is it that you work with parents, or how the resources help the parents also be able to be part of the equation and partner up with teachers?
Yeah.
Oftentimes it's really, sometimes the teachers feel overwhelmed and so
Mhm.
on, and they feel that maybe they may not get that support at home. But
Sure.
we know that home life can be very difficult too as well. So
Sure.
how can
Love
Gen
to
Mindful kind of help
Sure.
bridge that gap and start building some relationships there and partnerships?
I'd love to speak to that. So we designed the classroom toolkit to have a bridging home and school component. So a classroom that embraces the time and toolkit will get a set of lessons that they're doing in their morning meetings, and they have a little take home letter so the parent knows what's happening at school, that they're using positive or responsive discipline practices in the classroom. And this is explained very simply to the parent. Okay, my child is being taught and encouraged instead of punished, and these are some of the lessons they're learning, and they are play based, child led, and appropriate for the young learner. Now, our toolkit is used in preschool up to about 5th grade. So we adapt some of these lessons. As you can tell, I'm focusing largely on early childhood in the stories I'm telling you. But one of the lessons might be something as simple as our song about the 4 main mood groups. So, just like how do we teach the alphabet? We sing a song, right? So, we have a little song about our feelings. And to bridge that into the home, how great to just have this child going home singing about their moods. When did I feel happy? When did I feel sad? When did I feel calm? When did I feel mad? And just like you, I was taught I cannot sing, so I rarely do that. So that was a rare treat for you to actually hear me sing. But so we are designing lessons that are engaging, they're play based, we're learning skills, and then we're bridging them into the home. So each lesson would have a little take home letter of what I learned today, and a little prompt where the parent might be prompted to ask a question. Can you sing the song for me? Something so simple. We are now literally teaching emotional literacy to the caregiver, to the student's parent. And that's how we do it. We teach and guide by modeling. So our model is to introduce it to the classroom and bridge it into the home. It is never homework. It's a get to, not a have to. And we are leading and guiding by example. And so what happens is parents get curious, they get excited, they hear about, like, we have these little plush toys, little heart here, who carries all their emotions, and they're learning by watching what's happening, and then families are then adopting. The other thing we have is an online learning portal. So we have what we call the Parent Caregiver Hub, and we have the Educator Hub. And this is a free resource where communities can come and support the learning that's happening in relationship, because we believe learning happens when it's tangible, play-based, and relationship-based. So that would be how we're doing it. And I think it's just as important to understand our educators are learning, not just our families and not just our children, and they deserve support. Behavior is communication. So if an educator is punishing or lashing out or yelling or stressed, we do not demonize that educator. We say, well, there's an educator that is under-resourced and deserves tools and support. So the more simple we can make it, and the time saving factor that you brought up is very important to those early childhood educators.
Absolutely. I have a question here from Amanda, who's joining us live. So Amanda is asking here, curious about researchers involved in the toolkit and the frameworks used in the tool development. Responsive can be from a multitude of lenses, dependent on diversity or not. So
Great.
maybe, I guess, maybe more of a comment there. So
Right.
anything that you'd like to add
Yes,
in response?
absolutely.
Mhm.
So the Time and Toolkit was developed based on trauma-informed research. So we want to introduce tools that work, that are inclusive for every child, and that meet the child where they are. When you have a timeout, you have a standard. If you meet it, then you're good. If you don't, then you're bad. What a time in says is that if there is an unwanted behavior in the classroom, that child is not punished, they are taught in that moment. That teaching moment is then modeled for every child in the classroom. So it is an inclusive, responsive form of classroom management. In terms of research, the Missouri Institute of Mental Health ran a research study and studied 135 children using the Time and Toolkit and the Gen M tools. And they found positive results across the board. I can tell you what we're really proud of what they looked at. So you might think, did they just look at behavior? No, what they actually measured was the adult stress levels. So the educators and the parents' stress levels went down and their sense of confidence went up. And then from there, they looked at key indicators for emotional intelligence. So basic emotional intelligence indicators of the adult and then of the child. And finally, they looked to behavior, because we believe that behavior is communication. And where education is missing the mark is they are measuring behavior alone. We know that misbehavior is up 57% in the classroom since COVID alone. And educators are asking, 70% are asking for more social emotional learning resources. And I think it's 60% are asking for more mental health support and resources. We can hit all of these when we get into our early childhood classrooms and we start teaching the skills that are needed for behavior, for mental health. It's early emotional literacy. So I'm so glad you brought up diversity and inclusion, because really that is the point. That is the mission of Gen M. We really need to disrupt what's happening in education, because it is not diverse in the way that we are, and it is not inclusive. Discipline is being used disparagingly. I can tell you that of the 250 preschoolers that are suspended each day, 50% are African American males. 50% African American males, 4-year-olds. Only 20% of the student body are African American males. So they are disproportionately represented. And so you can also look to learning differences in children. Children with learning differences are disproportionately receiving punitive discipline practices. And this is true in preschool all the way up through 12th grade. So thank you for asking. We really need a revolution as I see it, and we need to standardize the classroom management practices. When I say standardize, we need to create some safety for children, because our children with trauma background, learning differences, or just strong, different wills, different natures, are at risk of truly being harmed in a way that we've touched on just in our own personal stories, how our early life experiences stayed with us for a long time. So the last thing, there are a number of research. We're doing research with the military right now. They are studying the use of the tools with deploying families. Because if you think about any time where there's disrupted attachment or high stress, that is a time where Gen M tools can come in and make a difference in the home or the classroom.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that wonderful response. And Amanda also, she replied with absolutely, she said, thank you for your thorough response also. And she also reiterates behavior is communication. And also, of course, reiterating what you just finished saying too, also that we need to
Yeah,
humanize,
I so
definitely
agree.
for sure.
And I want to remember
Mhm.
that it's true for us as adults too. We really work on being with what is. And so if a parent is struggling, we don't judge a parent, we embrace what is going on. We look to the missing skills, we look to the life experiences. That is true of a caregiver, that is true of an educator, and is certainly true of our children. So we want to teach and guide. We want to take a strength based approach, and we need to take social emotional learning seriously. It makes me cringe when I hear an educator say that is not why we're here. Like, get out, we're here, we're learning blankety blank. Well, I'm sorry, it is why we are here. Is there any more important reason? We are here to learn about ourselves and others. And if you look at 21st century skills, being part of a team, having language, being able to communicate your thoughts and your feelings, these are vital skills. And with the ed tech life, as AI comes up, it's up to us, the human, the brain in the room, to be the one to look at things through the human lens of compassion, empathy, diversity, inclusion. So,
Absolutely. That is
yeah.
so great. I love all of that. And I could definitely go on and on, because you've hit on so many things. But before we get into that next question, because I know you brought in towards the end, you know, uh, parents that are going to be on deployment, things of that sort. And then you're talking about caregivers, because I want to talk a little bit about the community that maybe you have built, around Generation Mindful, so I want to know,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about how that community is,
Oh, I'm excited to
kind
tell
of
you this.
rallying around,
It's such a
Gen
fun story.
Mindful, and
Yeah,
of course
it
the
started with one mom. I created the deck of with a ton of advice from psychologists, therapists, parents, educators, and we launched on Kickstarter, which immediately gave us an international community. And very quickly, we were in every state and 90 countries. And that blew my mind. And now what's happened? So this started in 2016. We now have over 1 million families and educators on Facebook. That's probably our largest active community. We have 2 different Facebook pages, but it is under the Positive Parenting Toddlers and Beyond page. We've grown to over 1 million followers. These are people that are actively pursuing, how do I use positive instead of punitive to raise my child? And then we have educators using the tools, homeschooling, and in early childhood settings and in nonprofit settings. We have therapists and educators using the tools. And again, now we're in over 120 countries that have actually physically received tools. And again, these are tangible tools, they ship in a box. Of course, we have online learning, and we have, as I mentioned, the online community and support. But what gets me so excited is it really is a one world solution. People are really wanting to know, how do I teach my child about emotions when I was not taught about emotions? And how do I discipline without punishment? We can be clear, firm, and consistent, and there is nothing permissive about positive. And that is, it really does take some learning to rewire the brain away from, well, if it doesn't hurt, it's not going to teach. That is false. That is false. So that's a little bit about the community. And again, as I mentioned, we just launched The Village, which is our free learning portal. We have a hub for educators and professionals, and we have a special hub for care providers, caregivers, and parents.
That is wonderful. That's so great to hear, because as we go through the website, and I know I've been sharing the link on the website too as well. And real quick, I just do want to share Amanda here. Play matters. So
Yes.
definitely. So I
Yeah.
have been sharing the link, and then what I'm going to do right now also is actually I want to share the website so that our audience members also can be very familiar, and then you can also give us a little walkthrough as far as what obviously educators, parents, caregivers, whomever it may be that is interested can go ahead and find here on the website. So
Right.
here we go. So
Oh, how
again,
fun.
that's jenmindful.com. So if you want to give us just a little quick tour,
Yep.
Suzanne, let us know where we can find some of the goods
Great.
that you were
So,
talking about today.
yep, there's really where the magic will happen is you can go shopping, obviously. And I recommend the shop all if you just want to poke around, or if you know. So let's start here. The Time and Toolkit is our biggest seller. You can start with that and you will be well served. It is scaffolded, it is guided, it is fun. And it comes with not just the posters and the cards and the activity mats, but this right here is a game changer. This is the What Can I Do activity mat. So it comes with 32 feeling faces cards that are very diverse in the representation, and it comes with tools for regulation. So the child is guided through what happened, what can I do? So they start with I feel, and they notice how they're feeling. And then they say, what can I do about it? And they choose their own strategies. And so then they check back in and they say, now how am I feeling? So this might sound small, but this is huge. This is interoception. This is self-awareness. And then at the very end, it says, am I feeling better? Yes, no, or a little bit. So right here, we've taken what is emotional regulation. We've demystified it and we have made it so simple and just literally walked you through. So that's the Time and Toolkit. And if you go to courses, you'll see we break down our courses by parents and professionals. So I think probably the biggest game changer under parenting courses on the entire website is our parent course right there called Positive Parenting. You're looking at that right there, that Positive Parenting. It's that third item on that square right there under Shop All. That Positive Parenting, if you go down
Oh,
next to the
all right
heart,
here.
right
Mhm.
there, that right there is it comes with a lifetime membership where we get on every month live, like you and I are doing right now. We get on as a community. So I always say I would give this free to everyone if I could in the entire planet. Instead of that, we've made it super affordable with free lifetime memberships. So honestly, we want to grow, grow, grow. We want you to stay, and we really are calling it the village for a reason, because it really is about the journey, right? Raising children comes with a lot of healing of the self. And whether you are an educator working with children, or you are a parent or a caregiver, grandma, or a foster family, you are doing that inner work. You are learning and you are growing, and you deserve tools and support and community. So that is Generation Mindful. And you can just poke around. There's a whole section of free resources there as well.
Oh, that is great. And I really love this. I mean, the price. and it's lifetime. It really is not that expensive, and more than anything, like you said, it's just helps that community. I mean, you're logging on as a community, you're sharing, you're learning from one another, you're sharing each other's successes, you're sharing each other's maybe some barriers that you've come across, things of that sort. But like you mentioned, it's much like as a learner, we're curious, we want to know what's working, what's not, what can we try. And I think it's a great option for just understanding that we're always lifelong learners. There's no one right way for everybody. Everybody's different, everybody's situation and circumstance is different, but the fact that you have this community that you can go to and feel that support, that is something that is great. And also, just the game, the time in toolkit, I was just like, this is amazing because students are learning, they're socializing, they're collaborating, all those soft skills are developing at such a young age, and you're reinforcing them in the classroom, and if they get to do that at home too, it's reinforced. And again, you can break those cycles, and just continue to move forward in a very positive way, and understanding how to self-regulate, understanding how to deal with, if you get a teacher that puts you in the orange, with the clothespin, how to deal with it. You know how to ask
Like
questions.
that little girl who went home with her
Oh
"I
my
was
gosh.
bad today" card,
Mhm.
and she had already reframed it for herself. You asked about research, and I wanted to mention Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence has done some phenomenal research on the impact of the kind of classroom management that the Time and Toolkit brings. And what we're finding is that in a classroom where it is chaos, it is mayhem, there is misbehavior left and right. What happens when you take it on as a class? Inside the day, inside the learning, the way you manage the misbehavior is the learning. It's not a distraction from the learning, it is the learning. And the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence showed by the end of the school year, those classrooms that took on those opportunities to do the teaching in the moment actually transformed misbehavior for the entire classroom. And they were having more learning time, less lost learning time, less students getting disciplined. And guess what? Less burnout, because the teacher was like, I love this. I love my class. They are loving their learning. So I think we need to get rid of the notion that that's not why we're here. If we don't know how to listen or to sit still or to cooperate or to be kind, certainly it is why we are here. We want to have these life skills, and it is very appropriate for us to be reinforcing them and to transform misbehavior by taking them as teaching moments and to take the opportunity to teach to the missing skill. We would not do it any other way in any other class with any other form of learning, STEM and anything. So why would we do any less when it comes to social and emotional
Wow.
learning?
That is so true. That is so powerful. What a great way to end this conversation, Suzanne. That was amazing. And thank you so much for all your shares. And just really, I learned so much today. And I'm sure our audience members too will definitely be taking some knowledge nuggets and sprinkle them onto what they're doing great already, because this was a lot of great content, a lot of great ideas, a lot of just learning that happened here. And just to also help us reflect, not only as parents, but also as educators, being in this space, working with children of all different backgrounds coming into your classroom and learning how to not only help yourself in that situation, but also help the student more than anything, and building those partnerships, with family as well, and trying to do your best. And I agree with you on everything pretty much that you said, because even reflecting back as you're speaking on my experience within the classroom, it was different, very different, but you learned. And again, you learned that it's part of the learning process, making those connections with the students was very important, making those connections with the parents was very important, and collaborating. And now, like I said, this is something that's great that not only educators but parents can have. And I mean, to me, I'm still blown away that that the parenting course, is that much
Yeah.
for a lifetime pass. I mean, wow. I mean, that is amazing what you're offering, and
Thank
obviously
you.
research based. So thank you so much, Suzanne, for sharing just your passion, your work that you're doing, and just helping us learn that much more about what you're doing, but about ourselves. And like I mentioned, just really seeing it as a reflection piece for myself and our practice. Those of us that are going to be catching this on the replay for sure. So I'm really excited about that. But before we go and before we wrap up, Suzanne, I always love to end the show with the following three questions. So hopefully you're ready, because these are some of the best questions that a lot of people, they really, they love to hear
Okay,
our
I'm
guest
ready.
answers
I'm
on these.
ready.
All right. So here we go. So question number one, if you're familiar with Superman or really any superhero, we know that any superhero has a weakness or a point of weakness. In this case, Superman's weakness was kryptonite, that really just debilitated him when that kryptonite was nearby. So, and causing, just that gut jarring
Mm.
reaction for him. So I want to ask you, Suzanne, with your experience and the scope of work that you're doing, what would you say what is your current edu kryptonite?
Okay, I see the greatest barrier to education as our kryptonite is that we are reacting to behavior when we could be responding to the emotions and the needs that are under the behavior. So that is our kryptonite. The reacting to misbehavior, we call it, or unwanted behavior, we're missing the boat. We want to get under it and respond instead to the emotions and the unmet needs that drive it.
Excellent. Good answer. Thank you so much. All right, here we go. Question number two is, if you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
Aha. I would definitely include some basic early emotional literacy. And when I say early, it means we all needed it, but none of us got it this generation, and our kids deserve it. I think I would make it real simple: name it to tame it, feel it to heal it. And I would star my little heart guy here. We teach kids name it. We teach get out your binoculars to look for the emotions. So my name it would have heart like looking, name it, and then name it to tame it, feel it would have our hands on our heart because feelings happen in here, and heal it we'd be holding hands. So name it to tame it, feel it to heal it.
I love that. And I can definitely see that with the plush,
Yeah, I
up
would
there, just
big.
really colorful and
Yeah,
making that connection.
let's
And
do it.
and
Let's put that.
really, honestly, it's such a simple message, but so powerful when you really think about what it means, what it stands for. And then, of course, with the visual, I can definitely see it right now
I'm
in my head.
excited.
So
We
that it
got to get
would be an
that
amazing
billboard.
billboard. Yes. And then the last question is the following. If you had to write a book starting tomorrow, what would your book be about?
Mm. So I wrote a children's book. It was all about love, that we are love. We are taught that love is a verb, but I believe love is a noun, that you are love and that you are worthy. So I think I would probably do a version for adults, and it would have the same punchline. Because we all think that we need to earn love, that love is a verb and like either we're worthy of it or not. And instead, you are love. I think that would probably be the title. And I would offer various very practical, easy, playful ways to connect to the love we are in daily life, be it at home or work or the classroom.
Love it. Wonderful. Well, Suzanne, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad that we made this conversation happen. And I want to give a big shout out to Gavin,
Yeah.
Gavin, who was on the show and made this connection. And now I'm just thankful for you to not only be a guest, but also because you've really helped me reflect today on so many things. And obviously, having these conversations and what you share today is why I do what I do, and making sure that we bring some amazing content, amazing topics here to our educators within this space. So that way, week in and week out, they can continue to find something that is useful to them. Like I mentioned, those little knowledge nuggets that are so powerful, that can just one of those little things can change just a teacher's practice, and it could change something in a classroom for the better. And that's all it takes, just that little spark. Like I said, we don't always have to go down the same route. We can be that change maker within our classroom and for our students in a very positive way. So thank you so much for enlightening us today with everything that you shared through your work, through Gen Mindful too as well. So please, guys, make sure that you visit Gen Mindful. Make sure that you connect with Suzanne on LinkedIn. Make sure you connect on Twitter, on Instagram. Of course, all of that will be in the show notes as well, so you can go ahead and connect. But again, guys, thank you all so much for all of your support. As like I mentioned before, we do what we do for you, so we can bring you some amazing content and amazing guests with great conversations to continue to sharpen our skills each and every single day for our work. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all so much for the support. And if you're not already following us on all socials, please make sure that you visit us at My EdTech Life on pretty much on all socials: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, anything and all things. Just follow us at My EdTech Life. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, please make sure you hop over to YouTube if you haven't done so yet. Give us a thumbs up, give us a like. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. But as always, my friends, like I say, until next time, don't forget, stay techie. We'll see you next time.